In the heart of London's gilded decadence, where art, opulence, and moral ambiguity coalesce, lies the tragic tale of Dorian Gray, a young man whose soul is traded for the preservation of youth and beauty. Oscar Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray is not merely a story, it is a haunting dissection of human vanity, the fragility of morality, and the intoxicating allure of hedonism. To truly understand its depths, one must traverse not only its narrative, but also its underlying philosophical meditations on art, sin, and the human condition. The tale begins with the meeting of three central characters: Basil Hallward, a painter captivated by Dorian's ethereal beauty; Lord Henry Wotton, a witty, cynical aristocrat who wields words as weapons; and Dorian Gray himself, a boyish man whose beauty and naivety exude an almost otherworldly charm. Basil, in the throes of artistic obsession, paints a portrait of Dorian that transcends mere representation. It becomes an encapsulation of the man's very essence. Wilde's portrayal of Basil's infatuation with Dorian hints at themes of unspoken desire and the intoxicating power of muse and creator, a dynamic that mirrors the way society idolizes beauty as something divine yet transient. It is during this time that Dorian encounters Lord Henry, whose influence serves as the catalyst for his moral unraveling. Henry's philosophy, which he espouses with gleeful arrogance, revolves around the pursuit of pleasure and the rejection of conventional morality. He plants a sinister seed in Dorian's mind, suggesting that youth and beauty are the only things worth having in life, for they are fleeting. Dorian, enamored by Henry's eloquence and struck by the haunting truth in his words, makes an impetuous wish that his portrait would bear the marks of age and sin, while he himself remains forever young and unblemished. This wish, uttered in a moment of vain despair, becomes the linchpin of Dorian's downfall. The magical realism of the story takes hold as Dorian's wish is inexplicably granted. The painting, once a testament to his beauty, becomes a mirror to his soul. Over time, it reflects every act of cruelty, every indulgence, and every sin, while Dorian himself remains as unspoiled as the day Basil first painted him. Wilde never explains the mechanics of this supernatural phenomenon, and this ambiguity is one of the novel's strengths. The painting operates as a moral barometer, a haunting reminder that actions have consequences, even if they are not immediately visible. Dorian's descent begins innocently enough. At first, he is merely a young man enamored by his own image, caught in the intoxicating throes of admiration and vanity. However, Lord Henry's influence steers him toward a darker path. He begins to view life through a detached, almost experimental lens, treating people and experiences as instruments for his own pleasure. This mindset leads to his first true act of cruelty, the betrayal of Sybil Vane. Sybil, a young actress, becomes the embodiment of Dorian's romantic ideal. Her beauty and talent captivate him, and he falls in love with her not for who she is, but for what she represents, an artistic ideal of purity and grace. However, when Sybil's love for Dorian begins to overshadow her art, her acting falters. She delivers a lackluster performance one night, breaking the illusion Dorian had fallen for. In a moment of cold cruelty, he rejects her, crushing her spirit and driving her to suicide. This event marks the first visible change in the portrait. Dorian notices a slight curl of cruelty in the painted lips, a harbinger of the moral corruption that will soon consume him. At this point, Wilde masterfully delves into the psychology of guilt and detachment. While Dorian initially feels pangs of remorse, he quickly rationalizes Sybil's death as an artistic tragedy, a romantic end befitting a woman who failed to live up to his ideal. This rationalization is emblematic of Dorian's growing disconnection from reality and morality. The painting absorbs the weight of his guilt, allowing him to move forward unburdened by conscience. This detachment is chilling, for it reveals how easily humans can compartmentalize their sins when there are no visible repercussions. As the years pass, Dorian embraces a hedonistic lifestyle, indulging in every vice imaginable. Wilde paints a vivid picture of Dorian's moral decay, though he leaves much to the reader's imagination. The rumors surrounding Dorian become more damning, and the once innocent young man becomes a figure of scandal and mystery. Yet, his outward appearance remains untainted, a mask of eternal youth that conceals the rotting core within. The contrast between Dorian's physical perfection and the grotesque deterioration of the portrait is a powerful metaphor for the duality of human nature. It underscores Wilde's assertion that beauty is often superficial, a veneer that hides the complexities and darkness of the soul. The turning point in the story arrives when Basil confronts Dorian. Having heard the rumors and seen the changes in his former muse, Basil implores Dorian to repent and return to the path of virtue. It is in this moment that Dorian reveals the painting, now a monstrous distortion of his former self. Basil is horrified, not only by the grotesque image, but also by the realization that his art has become a vessel for Dorian's sins. In a fit of rage and panic, Dorian murders Basil, an act that seals his descent into moral depravity. The murder is both a literal and symbolic act of destroying the conscience that Basil represented. In the aftermath, Dorian's attempts to suppress his guilt grow increasingly desperate. He blackmails an old acquaintance, Alan Campbell, into disposing of Basil's body, further entangling himself in a web of lies and deceit. The portrait becomes more monstrous with each act, and though Dorian avoids looking at it, its presence looms over him like a specter. This period of the novel delves into the psychology of repression and denial. Dorian's refusal to confront the painting mirrors humanity's tendency to avoid facing the consequences of its actions. Yet, the painting's existence ensures that these consequences cannot be entirely escaped. The climax of Dorian's story is as tragic as it is inevitable. Unable to bear the weight of his sins, he lashes out in a final act of defiance. Taking a knife, he stabs the painting in an attempt to destroy the evidence of his corruption. In doing so, he inadvertently destroys himself. When his servants discover his body, they find an old, withered man lying on the floor, unrecognizable except for the rings on his fingers. The painting, meanwhile, has reverted to its original state, a testament to the youthful beauty that once defined him. Wilde's conclusion is both poetic and haunting. It suggests that while one may attempt to evade the consequences of their actions, these consequences are ultimately inescapable. The painting, as a representation of Dorian's soul, serves as a reminder that no amount of external beauty can mask internal decay. This duality between appearance and reality is a central theme of the novel, one that resonates deeply in a society obsessed with superficiality. Personally, I find the picture of Dorian Gray to be a timeless exploration of human nature. Wilde's prose is both exquisite and cutting, a testament to his wit and insight. The novel's themes of vanity, hedonism, and the corruption of innocence remain relevant in an age dominated by social media and the relentless pursuit of perfection. Dorian's story serves as a cautionary tale, warning of the dangers of valuing appearance over substance and pleasure over principle. The tragedy of Dorian Gray's life lies not only in his actions, but also in his refusal to acknowledge the full depth of his humanity. Wilde crafts Dorian as a character who prioritizes aestheticism and external gratification, a man who sees life as a series of experiences to be consumed rather than a journey of growth and understanding. This perspective is largely shaped by the influence of Lord Henry, who, despite his sharp intellect and charm, operates as an agent of destruction. Lord Henry's philosophy, summed up in his dictum that the only way to get rid of a temptation is to yield to it, appeals to Dorian's impressionable mind, setting him on a path where indulgence becomes synonymous with existence. What makes Lord Henry particularly fascinating is his paradoxical nature. Though he preaches a life of unbridled hedonism, he himself rarely engages in the vices he advocates. This detachment gives him an almost devilish quality, as though he exists merely to tempt others while remaining unscathed. Dorian, however, becomes the perfect canvas for Henry's philosophy, a living experiment that allows Henry to observe the effects of his worldview without facing the consequences himself. In this way, Henry acts as a Mephistophelian figure, offering Dorian the illusion of freedom, while subtly binding him to a life of enslavement to his desires. Dorian's initial embrace of this philosophy is intoxicating. Wilde describes his newfound zest for life with vivid imagery, capturing the allure of living without limits. Yet, beneath this euphoria lies a growing emptiness. The more Dorian indulges, the less satisfaction he derives, a phenomenon that speaks to the diminishing returns of pleasure. This theme is particularly resonant in a modern context, where the pursuit of instant gratification often leads to feelings of alienation and despair. Dorian's experiences serve as a poignant reminder that unchecked hedonism, far from liberating the soul, can lead to its corrosion. The portrait, as the embodiment of Dorian's inner self, becomes a powerful symbol of this corrosion. Each new sin leaves its mark on the canvas, transforming it from an image of youthful beauty into a grotesque caricature of human depravity. Wilde's decision to use a work of art as the vehicle for this transformation is significant, as it underscores the tension between art and morality, a central concern of the novel. While Basil views art as a means of capturing beauty and truth, the portrait's metamorphosis reveals a darker side of art, its capacity to expose the ugliness we wish to hide. This duality is mirrored in the relationship between Dorian and Basil. Initially, Basil's admiration for Dorian is almost reverential, bordering on obsession. He sees Dorian not just as a man, but as an ideal, a muse whose beauty inspires his finest work. However, as Dorian's true nature begins to surface, Basil's admiration turns to horror. His confrontation with Dorian in the final stages of the novel is one of its most powerful moments, as it forces both characters to confront the consequences of their actions. Basil's murder, therefore, is not merely a physical act, but a symbolic one, a severing of Dorian's last connection to his former self. The murder also marks a turning point in Dorian's psychological state. Up until this point, he has managed to compartmentalize his actions, viewing the portrait as a separate entity that bears the burden of his sins. However, Basil's death shatters this illusion. The act of taking a life is so visceral, so irrevocable, that it forces Dorian to confront the reality of his corruption. Wilde captures this moment with chilling precision, delving into Dorian's psyche as he grapples with the enormity of what he has done. The aftermath of the murder is a masterclass in psychological realism, as Dorian oscillates between guilt, denial, and a desperate attempt to restore his sense of control. This desperation manifests in his interactions with Alan Campbell, a scientist and former friend whom Dorian blackmails into disposing of Basil's body. The scene is one of the most unsettling in the novel, not only because of its gruesome implications, but also because it reveals the extent of Dorian's moral decay. By using blackmail to coerce Campbell, Dorian reduces another human being to a tool, further dehumanizing himself in the process. The fact that Campbell ultimately takes his own life adds another layer of tragedy, highlighting the collateral damage of Dorian's choices. As the narrative hurtles toward its conclusion, the pace quickens, mirroring Dorian's escalating sense of dread. Wilde masterfully builds tension, using the portrait as a constant, looming presence that serves as both a reminder of Dorian's sins and a harbinger of his doom. Dorian's increasing paranoia and isolation reflect the psychological toll of his lifestyle. Though he remains outwardly youthful and charming, he is internally consumed by fear and self-loathing. This duality between the external and internal, the visible and the hidden, is at the heart of the novel's exploration of identity and morality. The final act of the novel is as poetic as it is inevitable. Driven to the brink of madness, Dorian decides to destroy the portrait, believing that by doing so, he can free himself from its hold. The act is both a literal and symbolic attempt to sever his ties to the past, to obliterate the evidence of his sins. However, in stabbing the portrait, Dorian unwittingly fulfills the prophecy it represents. The magic that preserved his youth is undone, and his body is found aged and withered, bearing the full weight of his transgressions. This ending is a brilliant culmination of the novel's themes, as it reinforces the idea that one cannot escape the consequences of their actions. The portrait, which has served as a repository for Dorian's sins, ultimately demands retribution. Wilde's decision to restore the portrait to its original state in the final moments is a masterstroke, as it underscores the impermanence of beauty and the inevitability of decay. In death, Dorian is stripped of the illusions that defined his life, leaving only the stark truth of his humanity. Reflecting on the novel, one cannot help but marvel at Wilde's ability to weave profound philosophical insights into a narrative that is both captivating and deeply unsettling. At its core, the picture of Dorian Gray is a meditation on the dangers of aestheticism and the fragility of the human soul. It challenges readers to consider the cost of pursuing beauty and pleasure at the expense of morality and authenticity. Dorian's story is a cautionary tale, one that resonates across generations as a reminder of the perils of vanity and the enduring importance of integrity. The enduring power of Wilde's novel lies in its ability to hold a mirror up to society. Just as Dorian's portrait reflects his true self, the story compels readers to examine their own values and priorities. Are we, like Dorian, too consumed by the pursuit of external perfection? Do we, like Lord Henry, use words and ideas to manipulate rather than uplift? These questions linger long after the final page, making the picture of Dorian Gray a work of timeless relevance. As the novel unfolds, it becomes increasingly clear that Wilde's depiction of Dorian's life serves as a critique of both societal and personal moral failings. London, as portrayed in the novel, is a city of contrasts, a glittering facade of high society masking the grime of poverty and corruption. Dorian moves seamlessly between these two worlds, frequenting opulent gatherings and shadowy opium dens with equal ease. This duality mirrors his own split identity, the angelic appearance masking the moral abyss within. Wilde uses the city as an extension of Dorian's character, a labyrinth of decadence where beauty and corruption coexist. One of the most striking aspects of Dorian's transformation is his increasing detachment from human connection. Early in the novel, Dorian's interactions, though tinged with vanity, are still rooted in genuine emotions: his infatuation with Sybil, his friendship with Basil, and even his admiration for Lord Henry. However, as he becomes more consumed by his hedonistic pursuits, these relationships deteriorate. Sybil's tragic end marks the first fracture, but the pattern continues with Basil and Alan Campbell, culminating in Dorian's near-total isolation. This trajectory reflects a broader commentary on the isolating effects of selfishness and moral decay. Wilde suggests that by prioritizing pleasure over people, Dorian not only loses his humanity, but also deprives himself of the very experiences that make life meaningful. Lord Henry, while central to Dorian's descent, remains an enigma throughout the novel. His wit and charisma make him a magnetic figure, but his detachment from the consequences of his words renders him both fascinating and deeply unsettling. Wilde uses Henry as a mouthpiece for many of his own views on art, beauty, and society, but the character's cynicism often undermines the sincerity of these philosophies. For instance, Henry's dismissal of love and morality as mere constructs contrasts sharply with the profound emotional and ethical struggles faced by other characters. This juxtaposition raises questions about the value of Henry's philosophy. Is it a liberating rejection of societal constraints, or a hollow justification for selfishness? One of the most poignant moments in the novel is Dorian's realization that his pursuit of pleasure has left him empty. Despite his beauty and wealth, he finds little joy in life, his experiences increasingly devoid of meaning. This existential despair is encapsulated in his visits to the opium dens, where he seeks oblivion rather than satisfaction. Wilde's depiction of these scenes is both vivid and haunting, capturing the desperation of a man trying to escape himself. The contrast between Dorian's outward perfection and his inner turmoil underscores the novel's central theme: that true fulfillment cannot be found in superficial pursuits. The role of art in the novel is another rich vein for analysis. Wilde's preface famously asserts that all art is quite useless, a statement that seems paradoxical given the pivotal role of Basil's portrait in the story. However, this paradox is intentional, reflecting Wilde's belief in the autonomy of art. The portrait, as a work of art, is both a reflection of Dorian's beauty and a vessel for his sins, blurring the line between creation and reality. Basil's insistence that he put too much of himself into the painting further complicates this dynamic, suggesting that art is not merely a reflection of its subject, but also of its creator. This idea resonates with Wilde's broader philosophy of aestheticism, which celebrates art for its own sake, while acknowledging its power to reveal deeper truths. Dorian's ultimate demise is both inevitable and deeply ironic. Throughout the novel, he seeks to escape the consequences of his actions, using the portrait as a shield. However, in his final act of violence, he destroys the very object that has allowed him to maintain this illusion. Wilde's choice to have Dorian die at his own hand is significant, as it reinforces the idea that he is the architect of his own destruction. The transformation of the portrait back to its original state in the moment of his death is a poignant reminder of the cost of his choices, a fleeting beauty preserved at the expense of his soul. I find Dorian's story both compelling and deeply tragic. His descent into moral depravity is not driven by malice or evil intent, but by a series of choices rooted in vanity and insecurity. This makes him a profoundly human character, one whose flaws are recognizable and relatable. At the same time, his story serves as a cautionary tale, warning against the dangers of placing too much value on external appearances and transient pleasures. Wilde's ability to balance this moral lesson with a richly layered narrative is a testament to his skill as a writer. The philosophical underpinnings of the novel are equally fascinating. Wilde grapples with questions of identity, morality, and the nature of the self, using Dorian's story as a vehicle for these explorations. The portrait, as a representation of Dorian's inner self, raises intriguing questions about the relationship between appearance and reality. Is Dorian's outward beauty a reflection of his true self, or is the portrait a more accurate depiction? This tension between the seen and the unseen resonates with contemporary discussions of authenticity and self-presentation, particularly in an era dominated by social media and digital personas. Moreover, Wilde's exploration of sin and redemption is both nuanced and thought-provoking. While Dorian ultimately faces the consequences of his actions, the novel stops short of offering a clear moral resolution. His death is not portrayed as a moment of redemption, but as an act of despair, leaving readers to grapple with the ambiguity of his fate. This lack of closure is one of the novel's greatest strengths, as it forces readers to confront the complexity of Dorian's character and the broader questions posed by the story. As I reflect on the picture of Dorian Gray, I am struck by its enduring relevance. The themes of vanity, moral corruption, and the pursuit of pleasure are as pertinent today as they were in Wilde's time. In a world that increasingly values appearance and consumption, Dorian's story serves as a powerful reminder of the dangers of losing sight of what truly matters. At the same time, the novel's rich symbolism and philosophical depth offer endless avenues for interpretation, ensuring its place as a cornerstone of literary and cultural discourse. As we reach the culmination of the picture of Dorian Gray, it becomes essential to reflect on the broader implications of the narrative, both within the world Wilde has crafted and in the context of the human condition. The beauty of Wilde's storytelling lies in his ability to layer meaning into every moment, every choice, and every character interaction. The novel is not merely about Dorian's life, but a microcosm of society's endless struggle with virtue and vice, beauty and decay, freedom and consequence. Dorian Gray is, in many ways, a symbol of humanity's greatest paradox: the desire for eternal youth and beauty alongside the inescapable truths of mortality and moral accountability. Wilde does not offer Dorian as an archetypal villain. Rather, he is a deeply flawed and tragically human character. His journey is marked by an almost childlike naivety at the beginning, manipulated by external forces like Lord Henry's intoxicating philosophies and Basil's idealistic adoration. Yet, as the story progresses, the blame shifts subtly and inevitably to Dorian himself. He becomes an active participant in his corruption, making deliberate choices that deepen his moral abyss. What is particularly striking is Dorian's relationship with the painting. It is not merely a reflection of his sins, but an object that holds immense psychological power over him. At first, the painting is a source of awe and relief, a shield that allows him to indulge without consequences. But as the marks of his transgressions grow more grotesque, the painting becomes a source of torment. Wilde's portrayal of Dorian's shifting emotions toward the portrait mirrors the way humans grapple with their own consciences. The initial denial of guilt, the rationalizations, the avoidance, these are universal experiences, heightened by the supernatural element of the story. Wilde's use of symbolism extends beyond the portrait to encompass the entire narrative. The opium dens Dorian frequents symbolize his descent into escapism and self-destruction. The opulence of his lifestyle, contrasted with the squalor of these dens, underscores the duality of his existence. Similarly, the characters that orbit Dorian, Basil, Lord Henry, and even Sybil each represent different aspects of human experience. Basil embodies the idealism of art and morality, Lord Henry the seductive power of intellect and cynicism, and Sybil the fragile beauty of innocence and love. Their interactions with Dorian shape his journey, yet it is ultimately his choices that determine his fate. The philosophical undertones of the novel are perhaps its most enduring legacy. Wilde's exploration of aestheticism challenges readers to consider the role of beauty and art in their lives. Can art exist independently of morality, as Wilde suggests in his preface? Or does it, like Basil's painting, inevitably carry the imprint of human experience? The novel does not provide easy answers, leaving these questions open for interpretation. This ambiguity is a hallmark of Wilde's genius, allowing the story to resonate differently with each reader. One of the most compelling aspects of the picture of Dorian Gray is its commentary on the nature of influence. Lord Henry's role as a tempter and manipulator raises important questions about free will and responsibility. How much of Dorian's downfall can be attributed to Henry's influence, and how much to Dorian's own desires? Wilde seems to suggest that while external forces can shape our decisions, the ultimate responsibility lies within ourselves. Dorian's repeated choices to prioritize pleasure over principle, to silence his conscience in favor of indulgence, reveal a man unwilling to confront the consequences of his actions. Dorian's death is both tragic and fitting. His attempt to destroy the painting is an act of desperation, a final bid to escape the weight of his sins. Yet, in doing so, he inadvertently seals his fate. The restoration of the painting to its original beauty, juxtaposed with Dorian's withered corpse, is a powerful image that encapsulates the novel's themes. It suggests that while beauty may fade and sins may be concealed, the truth of one's character is inescapable. The painting, as a symbol of Dorian's soul, reclaims its rightful place, reminding us that no one can truly escape the consequences of their actions. Reflecting on the novel's conclusion, one cannot help but feel a sense of loss, not just for Dorian, but for all the characters whose lives are irrevocably altered by his choices. Basil, whose devotion to Dorian blinds him to the darker aspects of his nature, pays the ultimate price for his faith. Sybil, who represents the innocence and idealism that Dorian once possessed, becomes a casualty of his cruelty. Even Lord Henry, who seems untouched by the events of the story, is left with the realization that his philosophies, while intellectually stimulating, have had devastating real-world consequences. On a personal note, I find Wilde's portrayal of Dorian's inner turmoil to be one of the most profound aspects of the novel. His struggles with guilt, denial, and self-loathing are deeply relatable, even if his circumstances are extraordinary. Wilde captures the complexity of the human psyche with remarkable precision, creating a character who is both repellent and sympathetic. Dorian's actions are abhorrent, Yet his vulnerability and despair evoke a sense of pity. This duality is what makes him such a compelling figure, one who lingers in the mind long after the final page. The themes of the picture of Dorian Gray are as relevant today as they were in Wilde's time. In an age dominated by social media and the relentless pursuit of perfection, Dorian's story serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of valuing appearance over authenticity. The novel challenges readers to consider the true cost of their desires and the impact of their choices on themselves and others. It is a reminder that beauty, while fleeting and superficial, can never substitute for the deeper truths of character and integrity. The picture of Dorian Gray is a masterpiece that transcends its time. Wilde's exquisite prose, rich symbolism, and profound philosophical insights make it a work of enduring relevance. Dorian's story is a mirror not just for the characters within the novel, but for the readers themselves. It forces us to confront our own vanity, our own moral compromises, and our own humanity. Wilde's genius lies in his ability to weave these complex themes into a narrative that is as captivating as it is thought-provoking. Dorian Gray may have been undone by his pursuit of beauty, but his story ensures that the truths he uncovered will never fade.